I am so glad to be here and to be able to talk to you about, in the poet's words, the world that we design for our young children and how it plays out through every decade of adult life. As you heard, I have been directing the longest study of adult life that's ever been done. It's been going for 87 years. It began in 1938. And it began with two groups at Harvard. One, a group of boys from Boston's poorest neighborhoods and most disadvantaged families. And these were families known for domestic violence and severe parental, mental, and physical illness. And the question of the investigators was, how is it that children born into really disadvantaged circumstances manage to stay on good developmental paths? What are the things we can find out about what predicts that? And the other group was a group of Harvard University undergraduate students who were chosen by their deans as fine, upstanding specimens. And there, too, the question was, what is normal development, healthy development, from adolescence onward? I'm the fourth director of the study. The study founders would never have dreamed I would be standing here today talking to you about an ongoing concern. So when we first studied these men, we asked them lengthy questions about their lives, about their hopes for the future, psychological exams, medical exams, and then we went to their homes. And we talked to their parents, we talked to their grandparents. There are wonderful notes in our files about what was being served for dinner and what the curtains looked like on the windows in 1938. And then all of these boys and young men grew up and became doctors and factory workers and attorneys and bricklayers. John F. Kennedy was part of the Harvard group. We recently found out that a serial murderer was part of the inner city group, but most of these people were not famous, they weren't infamous, they were leading their lives, and they were giving us the gift to science, of sharing their lives with us over decades. And eventually, we studied aging and retirement. All of our original 724 men have died except for 10. Those 10 people are over age 100, and we are still in touch with them. And if we've expanded to spouses and to their children, all of whom are baby boomers, mostly in their 60s. And so we have a balance of women and men now, not just our original young men. So what did we study? Mental health, physical health, work life, relationships. And we've used all the traditional methods, questionnaires and interviews, but then as new methods came into being, we've started drawing blood to measure DNA and mRNA. We've put people into the MRI scanner and watched their brains light up as we show them different images. We deliberately stress them out in our laboratory and then watch how they calm down from stress. All of this as a way to understand this concept we call well-being and who thrives and who doesn't. So what have we learned? Well, after hundreds of scientific papers and more than a dozen books, the most dramatic finding of our study was that the people who stayed happy and healthy and lived the longest were the people who were more connected to others, and particularly the people who had warmer relationships with other people. Initially, we didn't believe that, because how could relationships actually get into our bodies and change our physiology? How could the quality of our relationships make it more or less likely that we get heart disease or diabetes or arthritis? But many groups have found this now. We understand it's quite a robust finding. And what we have come to understand is that it is these social and emotional skills that are learned in childhood that have everything to do with the quality of our relationships that keep us healthy as well as happy. So one of the things we can do, because we're a longitudinal study, is we could look at the warmth of someone's childhood, as talked about by parents, grandparents, and the child himself. And we could see whether that determined what your marriage was like in your 80s. And what we found was that the people who had the warmest childhoods were the most securely attached to their partners at age 80. And I can tell you as a researcher, it is almost unheard of to be able to find a connection statistically across 60, 70 years. And that's how strong the connection is, that it shows up. And what we found, how does this happen? Why does a warm childhood convey this benefit in your 80s? It's because of your coping skills. It's because of those social and emotional skills that are laid down in childhood and that are used all the way throughout life. That said, we know that loneliness, social disconnection, is epidemic in our cultures. That in the US and in the UK, at least 1 in 4 people will tell you they are lonely much or all of the time. And our social disconnection is increasing. This bowler is from the book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, in which he has traced our increasing disconnection from each other since the 1950s and accelerated by the digital revolution. So what does that mean? It means we don't volunteer as much in our communities. We don't go to houses of worship as often. We don't go out and see friends. We don't have friends over. We don't eat together as families nearly as often as we used to. And all of this is a disinvestment in social capital, as we call it. Loneliness at work turns out to be a very important and impactful phenomenon. The Gallup organization did a survey of 15 million workers around the world, all age groups, all industries, all cultures. And one of their big questions was, do you have a best friend at work? And what that meant was, is there anybody at work who you can talk to about personal matters? Only 3 out of 10 workers said they had a friend at work. But those 3 out of 10 workers were better producers, as judged by their supervisors and their peers. They were happier at their jobs. They were less likely to get injured on the job. They were less likely to leave their jobs for other opportunities. And those other 7 out of 10 people who didn't have a friend at work, the vast majority said that they were not engaged in their jobs. They just showed up, signed in, signed out. That was it. The other thing that the Gallup survey taught us was that half of CEOs will say that they are lonely much or all of the time. Now, many leaders of large organizations believe that social connection is a distraction from productivity, but it turns out it is just the opposite, that social connection is a driver of productivity and benefits the bottom line. So, with all of that, how do we start taking care of our relationships? How do we take initiatives like this one to set people up for more connection in their lives? For this, I'm going to turn to one of my Zen teachers, John Tarrant, who said, attention is the most basic form of love. If you think about it, giving our undivided attention to each other is the most precious thing we have to give. It's also now the most difficult thing we have to give, particularly in an age of digital screens that grab and keep our attention. And so, cultivating attention and helping our children learn to deploy their attention where it's most important is a skill we all need to learn, and we certainly need to help our children in this regard. So, my only graph for my talk today is this famous one. James Heckman was a Nobel Prize winning economist. And this graph did not appear in an economics journal. It's in the journal Science, the premier science journal in the world. What Heckman was doing was analyzing reams of data. And his question was, what is the return on investment if we invest at different points in childhood? And by return on investment, he meant once people reach adulthood, how educated are they? What is their earning power? Are they involved in crime? Are they dependent on the welfare state? And how much do they give back? And what he found, as you'll see here, is that the return on investment is astronomically higher for prenatal care, for early childhood, for preschool, and then it drops off even once children go to school and beyond. So what this means is that prevention in this way, investing in children and those who take care of them, is so much more cost effective than remediation. So, in terms of what this means for all of us who are thinking about our legacy, what do we want the world to be like, the world we designed? We asked our original subjects when they were in their 80s, looking back on your life, what are you proudest of? And many of the more advantaged people were captains of industry and active in the arts and politicians. Nobody said they were proudest of their accomplishments. Everybody said to us, I was a good partner. I was a good parent. I was a good boss. I was a good mentor. They didn't care about those accomplishments as they looked back. And so what it tells us is that the legacy that's going to be most meaningful to us, and certainly to the world, is about caring for each other. So I'm going to end with Warren Buffett, that famous long-term investor who wrote, "Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago." This is our opportunity to plant the most important seeds we can plant for a healthy future. Thank you very much.